Hey, I'm Jonathan Stewart. I'm here with Muhsin, Mike Rucker, and Luke Kuechly. Today we're going to have a conversation about our boy Dan Morgan, new GM, president of football operations. Let's get this thing started. Y'all played with him. Tell us about what you know.
You know, saying Dan's weird to me. I call him Demo. So Demo, that was our middle linebacker. That was our quarterback on defense. And I tell you what, you talk about a guy that knew football inside and out. He was our quarterback. He was getting us line. He was our Luke Kuechly back in the day, where he's telling, hey, lead open ruck. And so he's just a commander on the field. So I'm so excited that he's in a position that he can be able to take that, what he did on the football field, and to bring it inside the building and start to mold this football team so that we're getting back to where we need to be, where we're winning and we're on top.
Obviously playing against him, practicing against him every day. I think what we're getting is a fierce competitor. I think his career at Miami speaks for itself. He translated that right over to the NFL. He came in on day one and he took a leadership role. To Ruck's point, he took command of the defense. As a young guy, it's impressive, right? When you see a young guy coming in that takes this leadership role, embraces it. He was a guy who approached the game that, with a lot of intensity. And I think Dan has translated that over into his professional career, right? And you see some of the things that he's done along the way. He's been a part of some winning organizations. He knows football. He'll bring a sort of professionalism. I know Dan's got somewhat of a poker face, but he is a little jovial. So he's a guy who can have fun, knows how to have fun. I think one of the things I really respect about Dan is who's going to show up every day, right? One of the things I remember I told Dan in practice one time, I said, man, you play 100 miles an hour, right? You don't have to play that fast. You're fast enough to go about half, three-quarter speed and be better than everybody out here, right? But the only thing Dan knew was 100 miles an hour, right? Every day, right, he's bringing you his best every single day. There's no half-stepping. And I think in order for us to be our best, get back to the top, we need more people on this team that are going to go out there and you got to tell them, hey, you need to slow down versus, hey, you need to speed up. And I think Dan will be able to, because he was that guy, right? He'll be able to find the right kind of guys that we need. We don't need X's and O's as much as we need bros and Joes. And now you got the right guy looking at bros and Joes. And so I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the organization. I think this is one of the building blocks, right, to return back to where we need to be.
Yeah. So Demo is what you call him. Yeah. Do we need to get some shirts made?
I like that.
Yeah?
Yes,
Yeah.
I like that. Demo. That's the only one I know, Demo. Dan was kind of right on that edge as that middle linebacker spot started to transfer, right? So like when I first got in the league, the middle linebackers had the big shoulder pads, big neck rolls, and they were going downhill just smashing fullbacks, right? And as you look at Demo, he was smart because he didn't necessarily always have to smash in to people. He started using his speed and his abilities that like Muhsin talked about. And so as that game started transferring to guys that were faster, running for the sideline to sideline, Dan also adapted to that. And I think that in this game, you're going to have a lot of times where you need to adapt. And who we're picking, and okay, we're looking for this guy. We want this kind of guy, but all of a sudden he's not there. Or we need to move on. Those things are going to translate from the locker room of knowing how to handle personalities to the office and the boardrooms and to the draft where he's leading the charge. He's also a team player. He's not one that is just say, hey, it's my way or the highway. So he's taken everybody's input. So if we're on the D-line and say, hey, Dan, we need that call faster, let coach know, he's going to do that, right? Like he's a team player.
Yeah, and I think you look at Dan where he's been. He was super successful here in Carolina as a player, and then he was in Seattle. Ton of success with Schneider, Pete Carroll, how they did things out west. He's seen success in Buffalo. He's seen success here before. He knows what it looks like, and the collaborative effort kind of touches on that. He's going to take the good from here, the good from here, the good from here, and combine it. And then kind of back to what you're saying, the ability to trust. Waiver wire comes out. Hey, one of the scouts comes to Dan. Hey, I like this guy a lot. Dan's got to be willing, which he will, hey, I trust you, I take your word for it, we're gonna go try to get this guy. And I think one thing that helps Dan a lot was his time playing. He's seen guys that come in that are big, fast, strong, athletic, look the part, and then they come in and they can't play. He's also seen the guy that doesn't look the part, but is a really good football player. So he's kind of seen it from all different angles, as a player, as a guy in Seattle, as a guy in Buffalo, as a guy here. And the one thing that Dan has that I think is just so special is he's competitive, he's intense, and he's tough. When I was a little kid, Miami was playing, he was number 44, he had the washboard, neck roll, he had the tin advisor, and they were playing in a big game and he had turf toe. It was back when everyone wore screw-ins. They took one of the screw-ins out and he played, instead of having 7 studies, he had 6. And I remember I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like, guy playing through an injury. I was a little kid, but I'm like, it matters. It matters to him. And then I don't think he's a guy that's afraid to learn from people before him. You look at what he did, I'll speak to him as a player with Sam. So Sam Mills came in. Sam was like the first dude that was an off-the-ball backer in Carolina that was like our guy. The keep pounding, obviously everybody knows, came from Dan. So Dan learns from Sam, and then all the guys that I learned from, Beast and Thomas, and those guys learned from Dan. So Dan wasn't afraid to kind of take the torch from Sam and then teach the young guys. So Dan's got it from all angles. He's seen it from around the league. He's seen it as a player. He's seen it as a guy that can learn from somebody else and pass it along the way. So I'm super excited for Dan. He's worked his butt off to get where he is. He's a hometown guy, and I think we really have good direction with Dan and Canales.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You know, one of the things that I think is important to take into consideration here is, you know, the success that former players have had in these executive positions.
Well,
too.
John Lynch.
So you look at John Lynch, right, and how John Lynch played as a player. And you look at San Francisco and you look at the types of players that they're building that team with. They start putting these pieces together. And John Lynch, I played against John. I met John in the hole many days, right? I know what kind of guy he is and how he builds it. Ozzie Newsome, right? And how he was with Cleveland. And people know the toughness that Ozzie brought to the game and his ability to identify those guys on that defensive front and how Baltimore plays, you know, the style of play. You talk about changing the culture of an organization, right? It's important that it starts from the top, right? And even if these guys haven't been football players, they understand and recognize how important it is not to just get football, guys who know how to play football, real football players, right? That's important. You gotta understand and know how to identify real football players versus guys who just put a jersey on and can run a 4-4.
You gotta figure out why do they wanna come to Carolina? Why do they wanna play here? What's important to them? What's their makeup? I think when we've had success, obviously you guys on your team had a lot of success. We had success, Stu. And our best guys on the field were our best dudes in the locker room. Guys weren't putting on, guys weren't putting a front on, it's who they were. And guys that play like Dan, they know that and they get that and it makes sense to them. So I think we're all excited. I think all of us just want this team to have success. We've had so many good memories here and we want to see these guys and our fans have the opportunity to enjoy it.
Dan Morgan and the importance of him being able to communicate with agents and free agents, I think is really important given, you know, the Carolina Panthers state right now, getting guys here, right? And I think, you know, Dan's ability to communicate, Dan's ability to relate, you know, when guys say, oh, Dan Morgan's the GM, he knows ball. Like, if I'm gonna be a part of something, I'm gonna be part of that. I'm gonna be a part of the you know, the turnaround or whatever you want to call it for the Carolina Panthers. But man, I think that's great, man. Like you guys said, you know, only way we're going is up.
Yeah, and I think you hit something, Stu, with the communication, because we talk about you got guys that are on the team already, right? So he's familiar with that. You got a draft class that's coming, right? He's going to have his hand on. But then the part that you don't necessarily have a ton of control over are the free agents. And do they come here? And if they come here, why? And he's going to be part of that. And for him to be able to say, look, this is different. We're going to be physical and tough. And he tells them why they should be part of this train as it leaves the station. I think that communication is going to be big. And with him being that middle linebacker, being able to communicate with guys of all different backgrounds, right? I mean, that's the beauty of our locker room, is that, you know, we can talk, we can do everything, but at the end of the day, we're all focused towards one goal. And for Dan to be able to talk to those free agents, because that's going to be key. can you get someone in here that's going to buy into what you're talking about and where this train is going? And I feel like Dan is the guy to be able to do that. The thing that gives me goosebumps is, the history of a certain group of men. And when you talk about the Carolina Panthers, you cannot talk about keep pounding without talking about Coach Sam Mills. And Dan had a direct connection with Coach Sam, right? And I think you touched on it, Luke, about the lineage of the linebacking room and the middle linebackers. These are huge. And that's a direct correlation of Sam Mills and the way that Sam played. You look at that first Super Bowl team, Dan was part of that. Then you look at that 2015 team that you guys were part of. And one of the common threads with those two generations is that they were physical and they were tough, right? And I think that that's right up the alley of when you talk about getting back to the basics and getting back to the old days of where we were successful. Those were the common threads. You were able to run the ball, you were able to stop the run. And to be able to run the ball, you have to be physical, out on the ends with guys like Moose, that you guys got to stick your nose in it. And you got to be able to believe in it. And be able to stop the run, you got to have guys calling out the defenses and going downhill and playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And that to me says Sam Mills, it says Dan Morgan, it says John Beeson, it says Luke Kuechly, it says Thomas Davis, and all of that. And so I think when you think about keep pounding that Dan mentioned about getting back to those days, that means that we don't quit. Doesn't mean that things are easy. Everybody across the football league deals with stuff. You deal with injuries, but it's that internal drive that says no matter how hard the situation is, we will play the 60 minutes out. And I tell you what, you can turn on the TVs in the playoffs, you see where games look like they're out, and guys keep fighting. That's what keep pounding means. You don't quit. And I think that's what Dan's talking about.
And I think the other thing, sorry, Moose, cut you off, but I think keep pounding, yeah, that's on the field, you nailed it. I think what everybody talked about with Sam a lot too was just his relationships with guys. Dan would talk about his relationship with him as a coach. I know Smitty talked at Sammy's thing a couple years ago, and Dan has seen all that, and I think he values the relationship side of football. And I think that's what makes teams ultimately special is when they can play together, they come together as a unit. I'm sure you guys got a million stories too. We had so much fun on Saturdays before we go to away games, just messing around in the locker room, music, playing cards.
Those are the things that actually make a team great and special. Like I remember talking to Peanut Tillman. He came in like the first week or so that he was here. He kind of came back, he came by our locker room, me, Tovert sitting there, and he just started talking about, man, this place is different. Like I've been, other places, but something about this place, this locker room is special. And you hear that, and you hear it from all different types of free agents that have come around. And I wasn't a free agent until the end of my career when I went to New York Giants, and immediately I knew the difference. And it was just the presence of brotherhood. It was a presence of, oh, I know Thomas Davis's kids. Like I know all of them little rascals. Like he's playing for them. So I need to make sure I do my job so that way he's doing his job and everything is inclusive. You know what I'm saying? And so when you start developing, you have your why, right? For why you do things. But when you start developing the understanding of that guy's why and your why, that's when it really matters. That's when it starts making a different impact. And if you can get guys that are playing with that type of mentality, where it's like, yeah, this is a game, but it's a game to you. This is not just a game to me.
Yeah, that element, I tell you, it exists on all the special teams. All of the teams that are special, I should say. And that culture really started back in 95 and 96 with Dom Capers. I mean, Rucker, you were I didn't get a chance to play with Luke, but I can tell that when Luke was here with Thomas, that they had that special type of, environment and culture. You talk about culture, it's these simple things, right? It's having that wide receiver, for us, wide receiver night on Thursdays or Friday, whatever that night. And, it was me and Smitty and Ricky Pro going out or whatever the case may be. And I mean, when I walked in this locker room in 1996, we went to an NFC championship and I was a rookie. I thought that it would always be that way. But I played on the team. We had Lamar Lathan and Kevin Green and Sam Mills, Carlton Bailey, and all these different guys that were veterans from other teams and winning organizations like the Buffalo Bills and things like that. And they came here and they started this brotherhood. They started this culture, and the bar was set so high. It was like, okay, so that's the expectation, right? And then it passed itself along to the next generations of great players like Luke Kuechly and like you, Stewart. The takeaway for me is when you lose that it factor and that culture that really drives a team, right? It's the X factor that goes beyond the X's and O's. You got to get it back. You got to get it back, and there's no better way to get it back than put somebody in charge who understands, right, what it's supposed to look like.
One of the founders.
Yeah, one of the founders, right? He was passed that baton, right?
Yeah.
And so I think Dan will do a good job, and we're all excited for Dan, right? Knowing that we got that right person in place here is at least the first step in the right direction, and that's what we needed, right? We needed a step in the right direction. And I think to Luke's point here, right, having continuity where there's not, a disconnect between who's buying the groceries, the players, and who's cooking it, Dave Canales and his staff, right? There's not a disconnect between them two. Everybody is like, oh yeah, let's buy these groceries right here. Let's cook this meal right here, and let's roll, right? So and I don't know if we've ever been in lockstep with GM head coach, like at the level that it's at right now. So kudos to Tep and the team here for recognizing that we need a restart. And we need to go ahead and put it in, and here's the right way to do it. I think we're making some steps in the right direction.
I think you kind of segued in to our new head coach, and you look around the league and people talk about, Canales this, Canales that, he's really good, great energy, great dude, super good football mind. That stuff to me is all great, right? But I think the one thing that really shows up are what other players have said about him. I think Geno Smith came out with something and was just talking about how good he was for his career. Geno's not just going to go push that out if he didn't care about him. That's right. So Geno talks about him. A couple other guys in Tampa have been outwardly bummed, they're bummed that he's gone. He's a great coach and he's a good person, and I think he's one of those guys that you just talk to enough people, you can kind of put together an opinion. Obviously, I haven't met him yet. He hasn't had his press conference yet, but you talk to enough people around the league, you've got a good guy who cares about his guys, who loves the game of football, and you look at Russ, you look at Geno, you look what he did last year with Baker, all very positive. He was in Seattle for a long time. He was at SC with Pete Carroll. Pete thought enough of him to bring him to Seattle. He was with them in Seattle for a long time, slowly moved up the ladder. Last year in Tampa, Todd Bowles is like, hey, I'm gonna give you a chance. He took full advantage of that chance. The moment wasn't too big for him. And when you get your shot, some guys shine, some guys don't. He had the opportunity in 1 year they brought Baker in. They didn't know what they were going to get with Baker, and he said, you know what, I'm up for the challenge. I'm Baker. I'm going to make you a better football player. And in the back half of the season, they really made some strides.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
No, I think that's right. It's very encouraging. And when you look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, had an outstanding, just amazing college career, right? But has struggled to gain his footing, at the next level. It's got the talent, it's got the arm strength, right? He's got all these different assets and tools. And no one has really been able to harness that and put it into a package for him to excel. And so here you got a guy like Canales who's done it for Geno James, who's done it for other quarterbacks, right? And so he's able to look at what he has. You got Mike Evans, you got, and build a system around him that winds up being successful and turns it around, because no one thought Tampa had a chance in the NFC South, right? You look at Carr, you look at everything that was going on in the NFC South. The lucky charm, or whatever you want to call it, is really when Tampa's offense started to emerge, and you have to contribute that to the guy who was coordinating everything around this court. And I think a lot of people, they have this kind of misconception about what a coordinator is, right? It's not just a guy who has great X's and O's and knows how to call plays, right? Oh, I got this big mind, big brain, and I can call a bunch of plays. Right. No, it's like I got a Jonathan Stewart, I got a Moose, I got whoever, right? how do I design a play that fits Stewie's style? How do I design a offense that fits what Moose can do well, right? What Smitty can do well, what Bryce Young can do well. The mind that says, okay, here's my chess pieces. I'm going to put something together, not that I'm bringing with me, but it's going to fit what's already here. It's already here, right?
Adaptability.
Adaptability. And I think from what I've seen so far for a young upcoming coach, he's demonstrated the ability to say, okay, I can create something here with this. I got enough pieces in this box where I can create something, right? You can easily go from where we were at 1-15 to the Super Bowl in 2 years, right? With the same players. How does that happen, right? Oh, well, we got a couple of guys come in, this, that, and the other, and Dan helps that out. But if you're not coordinated the right way, if we didn't have Dan Henning that came in, who created the Wildcat offense, right? Like as a team, as an offensive unit, if you don't have a coordinator who can think about how to best utilize the talents that are in this locker room, not Seattle's, not Tampa's, but oh, by the way, he did go from here to there, successful. The trends say that he should be able to come in here, walk in here, and do the same thing. Now, I think the biggest question is, how does he control the whole thing? Because going from just controlling the offense to controlling the whole thing is another question. For what the team needs today, I think, Canales, he's got a lot to prove, but he's got a lot of opportunity here to continue to prove himself.
Charisma, man. Like, you talk about what you can do as a head coach. Is relay messages and relay the culture and be able to make that, have that communication, right? And charisma is a big piece of that, because I can talk to you all day in the face, but if I'm not talking in a way to relate, how am I actually communicating? I'm just articulating at that point. But if you can actually communicate and say, hey, Luke, I need you to get 20 tackles, and I believe that you can do it, because I've seen you in practice, I see how you move, or whatever it is. You get a guy to believe in themselves, especially when in this game, there's a lot of opportunities where self-doubt creeps in, especially nowadays with social media. You got guys that have a bad game. You have a quarterback that has a bad game. Who's gonna have that emotional intelligence to come next to that quarterback or that player or that linebacker, whatever it is, and say, hey, look, keep your head up, pick your head up. It's time to roll, we got this.
And I think one of the things, Dan and Coach, is getting the players that are going to do exactly like that, that are going to buy in, right? Because everybody might be talented, but everybody might not buy in. And I remember Coach Fox, when he came, he's like, I want smart and I want tough, right? I want smart and tough. And so you get the guys that buy in, and success doesn't have to be 5 years out, right? 1-15, boom, you're in the mix 2 years later. So it doesn't have to be 3-5 years out. You just got to find the right guys, and that'll be the first task is, let's see who is on this roster that wants to be here, who is smart and tough, and then let's go find the other guys that want to buy in, and then let's go.
And I think we're all, like I said, excited about Dan leading this charge and starting to bring back some of that culture. We had player-led teams, right? Where you go in the locker room and with coaches, first of all, we don't want you in the locker room. This is our locker room, right? Right? And, I used to tell my position coach, Richard Williamson, he would call me during the games all the time. So I go pick up the phone. He's like, what's going on down there? Tell me what you see. And we're having a conversation. Like I was trying to be like this extension of the coaching staff on the field and help guys get lined up, all kind of stuff, right? I used to have to tell Rich that, hey, you got me from Monday through Saturday. When Sunday comes, stop calling me. Stop calling me. I got this. You either gonna trust me or not on Sunday. And if I improvise a little bit, guess what? It's part of the deal. Right. But 90% of the time, I'm gonna be right on some of the stuff I'm gonna pick. But when you have that kind of player-led team, the leadership and the drive comes from within. The coaches don't need to motivate us. Give us what we need and let us go get this. That's where we need to get back to.
You learn different.
And you learn different, right?
You learn different. Like if you mess up, it's like, well, I did that.
Yeah. Oh, no question.
And you're going to have somebody that's going to let you know about it.
And you hold yourself accountable to a whole nother
standard.
standard.
That are going to hold you accountable.
Oh, yeah.
And I think just being honest. Like, you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest. Did I play well enough? Did I make my mistake? Did I not do my responsibility? I think you got to be honest with yourself first. If you start pointing fingers, then everybody's going to get defensive. But if you're like, hey, that wasn't good enough, I messed up, people are going to be like, okay, yeah. And just the relationship you had with with your coach to be able to, him to call you number one, to get the pulse. He wasn't calling a coach, he was calling you. And then the relationship you had to tell him, hey, I got it. And then the relationship you had that he was like, okay, Moose, you got it. And I think that's what this game ultimately comes down to, is the right people that believe in the same goal and the same journey and the same point out there, and the ability to trust and talk and know and form relationships and understand what motivates you. Because like Stu, you said, what's important to you is different than Ruck than Moose. So I'm pumped, man. I just want us to get out there and win some games.
Yeah.
Get back to it.
Yeah.
To it.